when I think about those years of ministry in the suffering church when it was under communism, really in many ways, I didn't have the big picture in front of me. I just knew what God had called me to, and I was ready to do the next thing. But when freedom came, do you remember when the Berlin Wall came down and the church in Eastern and Central Europe was freed? I had this sense that we had been preparing them for this moment, that God had sent me to Romania to prepare them for the time when the church would have the freedom to do its own thing. So soon after freedom came in '89, we decided to have a conference. This is just to illustrate the satisfaction of those years. When we had this opportunity now to bring the women together, I said to the women, we're going to have a conference, a women's conference, the first ever women's conference to be held in Romania. And so we invited all of our first generation students, and I told them, you can come if you bring the second generation with you. I wasn't sure they really existed. I'd never seen the whites of the eyes of the second generation because it was too dangerous for us to meet the second generation because they didn't know that their teachers were being taught by these clandestine visitors from the West. Well, on the day that the conference was to open in Oradea, I would go down to the train station to meet the women, my children, my spiritual children who were arriving. And as the trains and the buses would arrive, they would get off the train and shriek when they saw me. They'd say, Miriam, come and meet the second generation. And sometimes the second generation students would say, I've brought some third generation with me. And I remember that night as I got up to open the first ever women's conference. I think we had 400 women there. I remember thinking, if I died tonight, it has been worth it. But that's not the end of the story. That was in 1990. Probably about 10 years later, I was now living in Toronto, teaching in the Alliance Seminary, organizing the Alliance Extension branch in Toronto. My telephone rang, and when I picked up the phone, a little voice at the other end said, Miriam, it's Lydia, and I'm here in Toronto. Lydia was one of those first-generation women who in 1986 said to me, oh, I could never teach women. I have no gifts. I'm not a leader. But Lydia took over the women's ministry when I left the ministry to come back to North America. And now she was in Toronto. She had come by the invitation of the Romanian Immigrant Church in Toronto to show them how to start women's ministries in the immigrant church. She came over to my home for dinner that night and told me that, and this was back in about 2003, she said, there are thousands, as far as we know, perhaps 2,000 groups of women meeting across the country of Romania. And she said, the interesting thing is now the Romanian church in diaspora, in Portugal and Spain and Italy and Canada and US, they are inviting us to go and teach them how to do women's ministries. And we reflected together that this is missions come full circle because in 1985, the Canadian Alliance Church sent me to Romania to start women's ministries. And now the Romanian church in Romania is sending women to Canada to teach them how to do women's ministries in the immigrant church. Missions come full circle.